Thank you. Thank you, Doug. I love to have a baseball bat in my hand. I love to swing a baseball bat. It makes me feel good, makes me think. It's something I should do more often because it really is something that makes me feel okay. When I played baseball, and I played a lot of baseball in my life. In fact, in my family folklore, my grandfather put a baseball into my crib when I was a baby. Now, just maybe some of the magic rubbed off of that ball. I don't think my mom was too happy about this dirty old ball in my crib. But baseball has certainly been a big part of my life. And it was in baseball that I was first called a contact hitter. Well, in baseball, a contact hitter is somebody who makes contact with the ball. Might not hit a lot of home runs, but I hated to strike out. I wanted to make contact. And I wore that label with pride as a baseball player. Well, in the real world, which I consider baseball not to really be the real world, I think being a contact hitter is also very important. And it means connecting with people. And when I look at my life and the things that have happened to me, either with the Goldeyes or with my business, or my lifetime personal friends that I still have from childhood, what is the common denominator to any success that I've had in my life? It's in the connections I've made with people and how I've been able to build and foster those connections. So now I'm a professional speaker and I talk to business about how they can improve their communication and whatever is the problem. And when I go into a business, I can almost tell immediately what their issues are, and it's all about how they connect with people. So I'd like you to come on a little journey with me as I talk about how to be a better contact hitter. And to start with, I'd like you to imagine that you are the general manager of the Winnipeg Goldeyes. The date is June 7th, 1994. The gates have just opened and you're about to play the first game in Goldeyes history. Okay? You ready? Peanuts, popcorn, cold drinks here. The sounds of the ballpark, the smells, the excitement that ripples through a big crowd. You are so proud and so excited. It is a perfect day for baseball. The sky is a brilliant blue. The crowd poured in when those gates were open. As you stand there waiting, the PA announcer screams into the microphone for the fans to welcome the 1994 Winnipeg Goldeyes. You couldn't feel prouder at this moment in time. You sing the national anthem with all these people, and you sing loud. It's one of the most emotional renditions of the anthem you can ever remember being a part of. Everyone is waiting with anticipation for that first pitch. When the umpire puts his hands in the air and he yells, "Time!" And he turns around and looks into the ballpark, looking for you. And there you are, standing on the concourse behind home plate. And with his gnarled finger, he beckons you onto the field. Now, your feeling of pride and euphoria has just been replaced by one of terrible apprehension. You walk out in front of all those people, right to home plate, where the umpire, with complete disdain, says to you, "There are no baseballs." You forgot to order the balls. 6 months you've been working on this date. How could you forget something that important? Then it gets really bad. You realize in front of those 10,000 people, you're not wearing any clothes. I don't know what your worst nightmare or dream could possibly be, but that was mine. And I had that 7 days before the real opening day in 1994. It was 4:30 in the morning. I woke up in a cold sweat. Going back to sleep wasn't an option. I jumped in the shower. I drove down to Winnipeg Arena where we had our offices. I ran into the building, down the hallway to our storage area, whipped open the door, and there was 300 dozen. Brand new shiny baseball. I started work a little early that day. 7 days later was a beautiful day. The sun shone down. 14,000 people walked into Winnipeg Stadium to watch the first ever game of the Winnipeg Goldeyes. And when that PA announcer screamed into the microphone and the team ran onto the field in their brand new crisp uniforms, everything in that ballpark looked perfect to me. I had been involved in selling the outfield signs, in ordering the equipment, in selling tickets, everything that's part of running a pro sports franchise. And that day was magic. But when I looked at that day, I thought, how did this happen? That was the first day of 8 years of my life where I could not wait to get up in the morning. I didn't always get up at 4:30. But I loved going to work. And I thought, why? What is it about this? How did the Goldeyes become so successful? And trust me, across North America, Winnipeg in this world is known as an incredible minor league baseball town. How did home run become successful? How has all this happened in my life? And I realized it was who I had connected with and how I love being involved in organizations, in teams, and that is the magic that made all of this happen. So I want to just talk to you a little bit about when I thought about I think we can all agree that connecting with people is a good thing. How? What? What is it that makes it work? Well, I came up with a few ideas. And the first one's called listening to people. In fact, I call it engaged listening. You all know how to listen. You all know, you all have ears. This isn't anything that you've never heard of. But I can tell you something. There was a long time in my life when I was not a very good listener. I was too busy. Any of you ever get busy? I didn't want to take whatever time to stop what I was doing or think about what I was thinking to answer somebody's question, even if I'm the only one that had the answer sometimes. I was a lot more like this guy. But I learned. The reason I talk about this first is because it's the easiest thing to change, and it's probably the most significant. When I became a better listener, I became a better leader, manager, teammate, you name it. I became better, and my life became better because I was so much more connected with people because I was really listening to them. I mean, you know when somebody's listening and really not listening to you. We all know how that feels. Well, closely connected with listening is something I call investing time in people. Not giving your time to somebody because it's not of value. Not taking time from something else because that doesn't give the respect to the person that you're actually investing the time in. I'm talking about in believing that taking those, and sometimes we're only talking a few seconds, that you answer somebody or invest time in them. And I have to tell you a quick little story about a man that phoned me one day It was late in the afternoon. In fact, everybody else had gone home, and I was in the office. But my phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and this soft-spoken voice said to me, "Hello, Mr. Hindle. My name is Jeff Zimmerman, and I'd like to play for the Goldeyes." And I said, right off the bat, I said, "Well, so would a lot of guys, son. This is not my finest moment." There's dead silence on the phone. Dead silence to the point where I actually thought he'd hung up. And I was feeling a little bad about that. I said, "Are you still there?" And he quietly said, "Well, yes." I said, "Well, I'm sorry. Tell me your story." And he said, "Well, I used to pitch for Team Canada." I went, "Oh, like you're a real baseball player." You have no idea how many calls we got from people that wanted to play for the Goldeyes. I said, "So tell me a little bit." He told me some. I said, "That's great. You know what? I'll get back to you." I hung up the phone, Team Canada office in Ottawa. This guy answers the phone, and I said, "Hey, could you tell me the stats, what you have for a guy named Jeff Zimmerman who played for the national team?" And he said, "Sure, John, I'll be right back." He gets off the phone. I'm waiting there. About 2 minutes later, comes back, and he says, "Hey, I'm sorry. Nobody by the name of Jeff Zimmerman ever played for the Canada's national team." And I thought, "Oh, thanks, but are you kidding me? Like he didn't think I'd find out? Like you'll say anything to play pro baseball?" I was quite frustrated by the whole thing, and I went home. I went home for dinner. I was sitting there eating dinner, and something was bothering me. This guy, this soft-spoken man, was not lying to me. Something was not right. So I phoned a friend of mine in Saskatoon who I knew he had been involved in the program, and I said, "Hey, Jimmy, this is John Hindle. Do you ever heard of a guy named Jeff Zimmerman?" And I could just tell him light up on the phone. He said, "Absolutely, why?" I said, "Well, he called me today, and he wanted to know if he could play for the Goldeyes." He said, "If he's healthy, that guy could pitch anywhere. He's absolutely amazing." I said, "I just phoned the Baseball Canada office. They've never heard of him." He said, "John, it's like 7 o'clock in Ottawa. Who'd you speak to? The custodial staff? How would anybody there know?" That's not what it was. What it turned out is that the guy had been looking on the junior team program, not on the national team program. Well, Jeff Zimmerman was so good that not only did he drive his beat-up old truck to Winnipeg, limp into town, and play for us, he had the lowest earned run average of any pitcher in the Northern League that year. At the end of that year, the Texas Rangers called and signed him to a contract. And the following year, he had the lowest ERA of any pitcher in baseball. The following year, he was brought up to the Major League roster. He won his first 9 games, which tied an American League record. He pitched at the All-Star game in Fenway Park in Boston. And at the end of that year, he signed a 3-year contract for $11 million. The following winter, he donates a whole bunch of money to the Baseball Canada program. And they give him an award, and I'm at this fundraising dinner in Toronto. And Jeff Zimmerman's the honored guest, and he stands up and he said, "Folks, I need to thank a man who's here, Mr. John Hindle from the Winnipeg Goldeyes, for giving me my first chance in pro baseball." And I wanted to jump to my feet and say, "No, I'm the guy who almost scared you off the phone." Every time I feel I don't have enough time to invest in somebody or to take their issues seriously or engage them, a little voice goes off in my head that says, "Jeff Zimmerman, Jeff Zimmerman." And I try to not let that happen. Because if you do, what are you missing out on? What connection are you missing out on with people? You'll never know if you brush things aside and don't make that connection. Now, there's a couple of other things that I think are at the cornerstone of connecting with people. And respect is probably my favorite. It was my favorite word when I worked at the Winnipeg Goldeyes, because respect was not negotiable. And I don't mean that you respected me as the general manager or my star first baseman. I mean you respected everybody. And if that means they were selling popcorn, or they were that first person you met in the parking lot, how important is that guy? You come into my game, you're paying me to come, and the first person you meet that works for us is the guy in the parking lot. And if he smiles and makes you feel welcome, you are started on the perfect track to a nice evening. Those guys were important to me, and they all knew it. So I go into an organization and they'll say, hey, we're just not getting along here. I don't know what the problem is. And I walk in and the sales staff hate the inside workers, and the people over here have no respect for this other group. Look, this doesn't take a genius to figure out, my friends. You have a huge respect problem in your organization. I'm going to tell you a very quick story. When I left the Goldeyes, I went back to Home Run Sports. I then sold Home Run Sports, and I did some stuff. One of the things I did in 2004 is I got a visa and went down to be the president and general manager of the Sioux Falls Canaries baseball team. That was a very cool experience. I am sitting at my desk one day and I get a phone call, and this woman says, is this the John Hindle that used to be in Winnipeg? I said, yes. And she said, well, I don't know if you remember. The day that you came out to my school, you brought 2 of your players. And I need to tell you how much I appreciate when you came, because you made my staff and my kids feel like that was the most important thing you had to do. And I really want to thank you. And I was a little taken aback. I was, you don't have people say stuff like that to you every day. And I said, well, ma'am, thank you so much. But that was 5 years ago. Why have you called me today? Now, she told me a few things, but I'll say this. She had learned that day that not all organizations nor all people treat those kids or her staff in that manner. And somehow she just felt she had to pick up the phone because she had taken it for granted until that day. Now, are you kidding me? 5 years ago, I went out and basically just did my job. I could not tell you a single thing I said that day. But respect has nothing to do with what you said. It's got to do with how you made people feel inside. And if you treat people with respect, the connection you build with them is more powerful than you'll ever know. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to do, something that's really we should all be doing anyways. The fourth thing about connecting that I talk about is having fun. Now, I don't know how many of you know me like this, but I don't dress up in these costumes all that often. But I dressed up in that costume on Western night, I think we call it. I don't remember what we called it, but it was a fun day. We all had costumes, and every time one of the staff walked by me, they broke out in hilarious laughter because they knew that really wasn't what I did. But it was all part of having fun with them. And I think you all know that, and I see in many organizations that they try to do things with the staff. We had a baseball, I'll tell you the best thing I ever did with the Goldeyes, we had a baseball game on the field one night. Our staff loved it so much to pretend like they were pro players and go out and fool around. They never forgot that. Now, not everybody thinks it's okay to have fun at work or at church or whatever. Fortunately, that's not the case in this church, actually. But you know the guys at the border, the immigration guys, customs guys? They need to have more fun. So I'm driving down to a game one day. We're playing in Fargo, so I didn't get down on the bus. I never went on the bus. I drove my own car. So I could work most of the day, and then in the middle of the afternoon, I'd jump in my car and get down there for game time. And it's a Friday, so a whole bunch of our staff are going too. So I pull up to the border, and the guy comes out, and the immigration guy, and he says, citizenship? I said, Canadian. And he said, occupation? And I said, well, I'm the general manager of the Goldeyes. And this guy pulls his glasses down and peers over top of them. And he says, well, that's not really possible now, is it, sir? I said, what do you mean? I'm the general manager of the Goldeyes. He said, the guy 2 cars in front of you said he was the general manager of the Goldeyes. I said, you mean that guy in the red Civic? That's my communications officer. He might want to be the general manager, but look, here's my card. Well, he didn't think it was funny. I still think it's kind of funny. But every time for 2 years I crossed that border, I had to show 3 pieces of identification and a sworn letter that I really was who I said I was. It's okay to have fun. And the last thing is have some passion for what you do. If you don't have passion for what you do, there is no way you are going to connect with people on your team and expect them to have passion. I have a good friend. She's a professional speaker. And she had a dream that she was in front of a huge audience giving a presentation. Then she woke up. She actually was in front of an audience giving a presentation. It was time to re-energize. It was time to change what she was doing. Because it makes me insane to watch a professional speaker who has no passion for what they're talking about. Well, you see this picture up here? It's somebody doing the dishes. You know, the first speech I ever had to give in my life, I was a health inspector, my first job, Dauphin, Manitoba, proper dishwashing techniques. I am not passionate about dishes, trust me. That's not the point. I was passionate about doing a good job. And I tried to give a speech with a little flair and a little excitement, which I don't know if they'd ever seen that in dishwashing speeches. But it's one of the things that took me along the path. I ended up, in all my career with the government, I was the one asked to give presentations when we needed one done. And now I'm doing it for a living. So it just goes around, comes around. I think if you have passion for what you do, it'll always serve you well. Okay. Now, before I go on, I have to tell you about my golden rule. This is my favorite thing. I don't give a presentation without talking about this. And I don't know where it applies for you. You have to decide where it applies. Have you ever put fleas into a jar? Anybody? You know, one of these days I'm going to ask an audience that, and there's some guy's going to put his hand. I know it's going to happen. Well, if you put fleas into a jar, let me tell you what happens. They jump out the top of the jar. Doesn't matter how big the jar is. They're small, but they got strong little legs, and they'll jump out the top of the jar. There's only one way to keep fleas in a jar. You have to put a lid on the jar. And if you put a lid on a jar, a flea will jump up, bang its head on the lid once, the odd one twice. That's it. They will never hit their heads again on that lid. They will learn to jump just below the level of that lid. Now, aren't you glad you came out to hear that? I tell that story for one reason. People are exactly the same as that. If you have somebody in your organization, and in particular somebody kind of new on the scene or new on your committee or whatever, if they ask a question or make a suggestion and they are immediately met by, we don't do it that way. We've always done it this way. That will cost too much money. The number of reasons not to do something is virtually unlimited. But if that's what they hear, How many times are they going to bang their head on that lid? They are not. They are going to stop giving you their suggestions and their ideas, and you will lose an incredible opportunity to engage fully somebody who, by the way, when this happens, is just trying to help the very thing, organization, committee, or group that you're already a part of and believe in. It happens all the time. It happens even when I had a rule that if somebody had a question or a suggestion, like I'm sure you've all heard there's no such thing as a dumb question. Well, we took it to another level. Anybody who had a comment or question that was met by, we don't do it that way, they had to apologize. It was forbidden to say that in the Goldeyes organization. That doesn't mean it wasn't said. It doesn't mean I didn't say it. There's the odd time I can remember saying, or half saying, well, that's dumb. That'll never work. But then catch myself and go, oh, wait a minute. Well, there's some challenges to that. How do you think we could work through that? And as long as there's an openness to it, people feel valued. They feel engaged with you. You don't have to do every idea that comes up. Every idea is not doable, but every idea is worth respect and consideration. And this is the one time in any one of my presentations that I get a tad preachy. I apologize. But I truly believe this is at the core of a lot of organizations and issues that they could be better at. Okay. We are going to do something. I'd like you all to take a deep breath and then let it out. Okay. Richard, I'm not stealing your stuff. One of our ministers here on Sunday when he talks in front of the congregation says that every Sunday. I've never asked Richard why he does that, but I'm going to tell you what it does to me. It takes me out of just kind of being there, going through the motions, and I actually have to, okay, where are we at? What's going on? What's next? It changes my focus. It changes my perception. I think that's a very cool thing to do. So I want to talk to you about perception right now. And for anybody it's easy and would like to, I'd like you to stand up. And I'd like you to do something. I'd like you to put your hand up in the air. And I'd like you to point your index finger to the ceiling. And I'd like you to start drawing a circle in a clockwise direction. Now keep your finger pointed up and start lowering your arm. Lower your arm. Watch your finger. Watch your finger when it reaches your eye level. Something happens to your circle. Let's start again and do it from the top. Watch your finger and watch what happens to your clockwise circle as you lower it to eye level. All of a sudden, it's a counterclockwise circle. Do you see that? It starts clockwise. As you lower it, when it gets to eye level, it turns to counterclockwise. Isn't that amazing? Why is that? It's all from your point of view or your perception. It literally does change from this perception at eye level, which is kind of an interesting phenomena that, because eye level is where you meet a lot of people, you have a different perception. Now, I got to tell you something. When I first was taught this from probably the #1 guru in the world for interaction with audiences, I didn't get it. My finger didn't actually change. But what I was doing was, as I lowered it, I was putting it down. Well, it doesn't change if you do that. You have to keep your finger pointed up, and then it changes to counterclockwise. My whole point is perception is so powerful when you're connecting with somebody. Okay, you can sit or stand, whatever you want. And perception in a building like this is huge. Anytime you walk into let's say somebody comes in here on a Sunday to our church. They see, if they're new, this is foreign territory to them. They see people interacting that are obviously already connected with each other. And they are very much on the outside of any time you go into a group and they've all been there and you're new, you feel differently. And it's so important to try and look at another person's perception in any interaction. Because anytime I'm interacting with you, there are two perceptions going on, mine and yours. The more you can understand their perception, a much more powerful chance you have of connecting with them. And I think that's something that applies in a church, but it applies to virtually any relationship, student, teacher, an old person, a younger person, you name it. There's often two different perceptions going on. And I think it's worth some effort to try and see the other person's perception. Okay, Doug mentioned this. When I wrote my book, Making Contact, the first draft of that book, there was no mention of this whatsoever in it. If you read the book today, it's the largest chapter in the book. That's a beautiful thing of writing. When you write, you figure out what you care about, where is your passion, how do you flush something out? And that's what happened when I was writing. I kept saying, well, wait a minute, what about this thing? Like, you want to know why. Even though you're a good listener and respect and happy, and even though you do all that stuff perfectly, there are still some people you connect with easier than other people. Why? Well, I figured out why for me, and I'm just going to talk briefly about a couple of examples. I use extrovert and introvert because a lot of people know if they're an extrovert or an introvert, because it's kind of language we use. And here's an extrovert. They like talking. They talk sometimes before they think, or as they're thinking, they're talking. They're external the way they operate. They're energized by being in a group of people. Well, then there's introverts. They listen first before they talk. They always think before they speak, almost always. They're energized internally by thought process. So here's the thing, if you're connecting with them. If I ask you a question right now, what is your favorite baseball movie? I can almost guarantee that an extrovert would answer. Because an introvert would be thinking about the answer. Well, does that mean that the extroverts are the one with the best answer? Absolutely not necessarily. And if you want to get everything out of everybody, particularly in a group setting, I mean, one of my lifetime childhood friends that I talk about is an extreme introvert. And in a group, if you're sitting around, even if 4 or 5 people are throwing around ideas, he'll never say anything. He's the most brilliant person I know. I know no one else that if I said, what's 27 times 23, he'd just tell me. I don't know what his IQ is, but he's a very smart guy. But he never talks unless it's drawn out of him. You can't connect with everybody exactly the same way and expect to have the same level of connection with them. It simply doesn't happen. There are people that are logic-driven. They act according to what makes sense logically to them, and there are others that act what I call from the heart. And it's not wrong, or they're just different. And the last one I'll talk about is people that are detailed or people that are general. A detailed person wants all of the information before they act. They want to do something right once the first time. A general person just wants the basic parameters and they want to get going. They're itchy to get going. The reason I use this is because detailed people think general people are wrong, and vice versa. Well, nobody's wrong. Why can't you think like me? Because you think like you. You can't make people think like you. They are what they are. And the faster you recognize that, the less grief you'll have the rest of your entire lives. I could just give you 100 stories. If I did a half-day seminar, I would get people to give me examples that I know exist out there. So I make people in organizations that are having this type of conflict repeat this 2 or 3 times in the seminar, that not wrong, it's only different. I really do believe it's a critical thing. Okay. I'd like you to stand up again. This is the 7th inning stretch. How many of you have been to a Goldeyes game? Oh, lots. Well, then you know between innings stuff happens, and at the 7th inning of a baseball game, you stand up, they sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Sorry, I don't have the music. And they stretch. Well, in the Goldeyes case, we choreographed an entire dance, which 8 years, I still never quite got it down perfectly. But we throw things in the crowd that I can do. These won't hurt. They're soft. And I have a couple extra if anybody has a grandkid that needs one. In just a couple of minutes. We're almost done. Okay, thanks. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories to drive home these points that I made. We already did that. The most infamous moment in Goldeyes history. We're doing it in a between-inning contest. It's the second time we've ever done this. These 3 go-karts are lined up at first base. They're supposed to drive from first base around behind the catcher at home plate over to third base. We have a little flag going. The 3 kids, one of them wins. This is a secret of the trade. All 3 of them get the same prize. The sponsor loves it. His logo goes in front of all these thousands of people. This is like a good promotion. Second time we do it, the PA announcer gets on the microphone and he says, "On your mark, get set, go!" 2 go-karts head off towards home plate. 1 go-kart heads directly at the pitcher's mound. I have no idea what this little guy was thinking. These carts only went 7 miles an hour, or 11 kilometers an hour. But he got so close to the pitcher's mound, the pitcher was just ready to jump off when he made a complete U-turn and headed right back across the baseline directly towards the visitor's dugout. I'm up in the suite level, and I'm looking down, and even from up there, I could see the white knuckles on this steering wheel and these big bug eyes as he drives at 7 miles an hour directly into the dugout. Just as my promotion manager runs across the field and arrives at the scene, she jumps into the dugout. And this little guy, he's still got big bug eyes. And she says, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "I'm in the dugout!" This is the greatest moment of his life. We calm him down. Now, of course, he didn't plunge into the dugout. The players saw him coming. It's in slow motion. They gently set him down. They gently lift him out. Now, all 3 kids got a Goldeyes baseball hat, except this one got a little more. He got an autographed ball and a team jacket. Season tickets for life. Mostly to calm his mom down. But here's the story. 2 innings later, I am walking underneath the concourse, and I hear a noise coming from a room that we don't use. I look into this room, and there's my promotions manager. I worked for her all 8 of my years. She's one of the best employees anyone could ever have. I look in, and she is sitting in a chair, bawling her eyes out. I run over to her, and I say, "Barb, what's the matter?" And she says, between sobs, "I never thought we could hurt a little kid." Now, nobody was hurt, but I guess possibility was there. Well, I said to her, "This is not your fault. You cannot take this on your shoulders alone. 6 of us were on that field yesterday when we planned this promotion, including me. None of us thought this could happen. I guarantee you we'll make sure this can never happen again. But you cannot take the weight of this on you. We're a team when we win. We're a team when something goes wrong." Now, I did that instinctively, but I can assure you, 8 years, championships, attendance records that we never thought were possible. You ask Barb today, what does she remember about our time at the Goldeyes? That is the moment in time she'd say is number 1. How many times when something goes wrong do we look for somebody to blame or somehow to make sense of it? And I'm one of those logic people. I'm doing that logically, instantly. But there's a time and a place for that. It's not like I'm ever going to forget how are we going to make sure this never happens again. But I need to make sure that my thought is initially to take care of the people involved, because it's highly unlikely anybody, when something goes wrong, wanted that to happen. Okay, I have one last story to tell you. A little more fun than that one. It's about this guy. His name is Juan de la Rosa. He is from the Dominican Republic, and he speaks Spanish. In case you were wondering, I don't speak Spanish. This is right near the beginning of the Goldeyes journey. And the team leaves on the bus. After the game, we give them something to eat. They jump on the bus. It's midnight. And they're headed down to Sioux City, Iowa. I go home. I am exhausted after a 6-game homestand, and I am in bed sleeping. It is 1:15 in the morning. The phone rings. I pick it up beside the bed, and it's my manager. And he said, "John, there's something wrong with Juan's paperwork, and this guy at the border won't let us through." And I said, "Oh, for goodness sakes, put the guy on the phone, let me talk to him." This guy gets on the phone, he said, "He's got the wrong paperwork, he doesn't get in." Click! I go, "This is great." I'm sitting there, half awake. The phone rings again. It's my manager. And he said, "Don't worry, John. We pulled back from the border. We put Juan in with the baggage underneath the bus." I sit bolt upright in bed, and I say, "You will not do that." I had visions of us being kicked out of the league, never crossing the border again. I said, "Look, take them to the Emerson Hotel. I'll phone them. They can keep them there in the lobby. I'll get somebody to come down and pick them up." Okay, he hangs up the phone. I quickly phone the Emerson Hotel. Very nice man says, "That's no problem. I understand, John. We'll take good care of him." And I hang up the phone. I think, okay, who am I going to go get Juan at 2 o'clock in the morning? Well, I'm not going to phone anybody at 2 o'clock. So I get up. So I drive to Emerson. I get there. It's about 3:30. And I go to the Emerson Hotel. Now, you guys know Emerson, like 600 people, quiet, quaint little town. There's not much going on at 2 in the morning. So I go to the door of the Emerson Hotel. And on the front door, there's a yellow sticky note. And the note says, "John, Go to room 12. Okay. I walk in, there's not a soul, not a sound. I walk down to room 12. It's a dimly lit hallway, and I quietly knock on the door. It sounds very loud to me. I'm trying to be very quiet. Nothing. So I knock louder. And I hear a rustling behind the door. No sound, no voice. And I say, Juan, is that you? And a voice from behind the door says, "Sí." I said, "Well, Juan, it's John. Are you going to open the door?" "Sí." This door opens just a crack, and this big eyeball looks out the door and looks me up and down. The door flings open, and this 6'4", 220-pound gentleman from the Dominican Republic jumps into my arms. He is clinging to my neck. And I say, "It's okay, Juan. It's okay. Calm down. I'm here. I'm going to take you home." No way is Juan letting go of me. There is no way. He's climbing all over me as we walk down the hallway and back out to the car. He won't even get in the passenger seat. He gets in the driver's seat and slides across, so I can't get away. We're driving back. Juan speaks very little English. I speak zero Spanish. But I figured it out as we were driving. Connecting with somebody, communicating with somebody, is not really about language. In the Dominican Republic, when you're in really big trouble, I don't know where you go, but Juan knew this. When you were in really big trouble in Canada, we sent you to the Emerson Hotel. I was his savior. I got him out of whatever that was to him. Juan was our best player the rest of the year. Juan never saw me, even if he saw me 5 times in an hour, every time he laid eyes on me, he had this big, huge grin. John was his amigo. He had saved him. And I just think, isn't like the perceptions that people have and what's going on in any relationship, you just never know. I'm going to conclude with one thing. Well, Doug mentioned I was going to have some books to sell. These books are all for sale. I have 3 books. Actually, I think I bring them here. Jackrabbits is the first one I wrote about my time in professional baseball. Making Contact's the one that I just came out with. And A Good Life, I have never, ever offered for sale until today. A Good Life is about my dad's life. Some of you in this room will know my dad. In fact, when I was talking about perception, I was going to mention that in this building, things happen to me that don't happen to me any other building anywhere. And one of those is the connection I have with my mom and dad, who spent many years here. So there are times when people are talking, and I dare say, I'm not trying to not pay attention, but I'm here connected with my mom and dad in some fashion, thinking about something that happened when they were here. And I wrote this book. This is the hardest thing I've ever written or ever will write in my life, I'm pretty sure. It is absolutely unbelievable, the stories he told me just before he passed away. And these books are available, and any book that I sell today, I am going to donate some of the money back to the charity that Doug was talking about. Let me leave you with the following. When I left the Winnipeg Goldeyes after 8 years, one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, I was given a lot of gifts. I had a big party. It was my family, my Goldeyes family, gave me a really good send-off. But there's one present that they gave me that means as much to me today as it did then. Yes, I'm glad we set attendance records and a championship and all the other good things that happened. But this is the most important thing that happened in those 8 years. This is a jar. In the jar was filled with all kinds of notes. And anybody that had worked for the Goldeyes was asked if they wanted to put a note in the jar about how they felt about our time together. Well, I started reading these notes and I very quickly realized I couldn't do this in public. I needed to do this in private. Because people said things like, it was a pleasure working for you, but you always made me feel like I was working with you. I went, oh, wow, did I do that for somebody? That's pretty neat. Thanks for believing in me. I think I know who wrote that, because they were down on their luck when they got a job with the Goldeyes. And somebody wrote, can you believe how much we planned and accomplished sitting in a hot tub in El Paso, Texas, at the baseball winter meetings, and how much stuff we talked about that night after a long day, and we implemented the next year at the Goldeyes, because we were so fully engaged that we were just having fun doing it. Well, what if you're going to get a jar? If you knew you were going to get a jar it could be at your job, or it could be in a committee that you're on, or any organization that you're involved in for any period of time. If people were going to give you a jar at the end filled with notes, what would you want those notes to say? Well, I don't know exactly what you'd want those notes to say. How about, you were respectful and fair? That'd be a nice thing if somebody put that in your jar. I really enjoyed our time together. You made coming so much more fun. You made a difference. We can all make a difference in people's lives. If you recognize how much you're impacting them, you can maybe make a bigger difference. I think those would all be pretty cool things. Or even if somebody just said thanks for being you. I hope whatever you'd like in your jar, that you're connecting with people in a fashion that you are being a good contact hitter, so that those notes are what you'd want them to say. Thank you so much for having me here tonight.